Before I start, I should say here that the majority of the clips on this video are from the LondonReal.tv movie called Plandemic Indoctrination, which is absolutely explosive. I highly recommend you go to London Real TV to watch the whole movie. In this video, I want to lay out a clear warning about where this could go if we don't wake up enough people very soon. There's a real and present danger that the cabal will deliberately release a weaponized version of the virus with a much higher mortality rate. The reason this second virus with a much higher mortality rate will be released is to justify all the goals in their multi-pronged attack agenda. The second virus won't be called a second virus. The media will sell it as a mutated version that has come about because we, the masses, didn't do as we were told with the masks, the lockdown, the social distancing, etc. This, of course, will empower the fast asleep zombie collaborators to blame us, the selfish ones, on the removal of freedoms that will be much more severe, of course, paving the way to mandatory vaccines or impossible to live a normal life without it, such as your kids can't go to school without a vaccine, you can't have a driving license, a passport, or even use the NHS without a vaccine. This will also allow the vaccine companies to officially cover up the crimes of their past. For 40 or 50 years, the vaccine companies have been causing the deaths and irreversible serious injuries to millions of adults and children, and they know time is running out. The whistleblowers are gathering in numbers. The internet's like a leaky bucket. They censor it wherever they can to rub out their crimes, like Lady Macbeth in Hamlet rubbing out the damned spot. They know that the net is closing in on them, and if they don't destroy the past by winning now, a lot of them are going to be going to jail when this is exposed. They have to cover up vaccine damage and blame it today on COVID-19. It's the cover-up alibi for thousands upon thousands of deaths and permanent injury they've caused in the past. The release of a second, much more deadly virus will be perfect for them because they can bury their past, bring in massive profits with global vaccination program, and achieve many of their multi-pronged attack goals. Let there be no doubt that this is a carefully organized plan. Here's my first clip.
So here it is. This is from the World Health Organization's website. Their document is called A World at Risk. It's an annual report on global preparedness for health emergencies. Oh, thanks. Thanks, World Health Organization. And it came out in September 2019, so last year, before any of this happened. And you might notice a big thing that they like to use as an image for the coronavirus right on the front cover. And also, very interesting, a lot of people all wearing masks. Well, you can read through the whole document. We'll have the link down below. This is all factual information, fact checkers. And here's their progress indicators by September 2020. So these are the things they want to be already in process by September of this year. And one of the points says the United Nations, including WHO, conducts at least 2 system-wide training and simulation exercises, including one for covering the deliberate release of a lethal respiratory pathogen. An exercise. If you haven't been paying attention, anytime the government or any sort of government-related, in this case you can call it a sort of a crony capitalist controlled government sort of related organization like the WHO, whenever they say they're doing an exercise and they say where or when, run, get the F out of there. Every time it's the actual thing. This has happened countless times.
Now let's look at what they clearly had planned out just 5 months before the fake pandemic. Remember, this next video was their simulation made 5 months before we knew about it.
On behalf of our center and our partners, the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our audience here in New York, as well as our larger virtual audience participating online today. The Event 201 scenario is fictional. Today's scenario is going to simulate meetings of a multi-stakeholder group called the Pandemic Emergency Board.
We're at the start of what's looking like it will be a severe pandemic. And there are problems emerging that can only be solved by global business and governments working together.
There's been some conspiracy theories that are around about the potential that pharmaceutical companies or the UN have released this for their own benefit.
And maybe this is a time for us to showcase some cases where we are able to bring forward some bad actors and leave it before the courts to decide whether they have actually spread some fake news.
A new coronavirus. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia.
In related news, a significant demand for personal protective equipment like N95 masks and gloves are on the rise. Patients are overwhelming healthcare facilities. People are avoiding public spaces out of fear of infection and in compliance with public health recommendations. Our U.S. affiliate has just released polling results on public expectations for a vaccine, and 65% of those polled are eager to take the vaccine, even if it's experimental.
I am not optimistic about having the vaccine in time to be relevant during this pandemic.
With enough money and political will, anything is possible.
Penalties have been put in place for spreading harmful falsehoods, including arrests.
If the solution means controlling and reducing access to information, I think it's the right choice.
Interesting of note was the censorship information was baked into the cake before. Let's look at further evidence of planning as this was advanced and further evidence this was premeditated.
Our first red flag came out when we read the World at Risk scenario. Now there's an organization called the Global Monitoring Preparedness Board. This organization is a part of the World Health Organization, and this board includes Dr. Elias from the Gates Foundation and Anthony Fauci from NIAID. These two individuals, plus the director of the Center for Disease Control in China, come out with a recommendation that says that by September 2020, 2 global pandemic preparedness exercises have to be completed. And one of them has to be done on the release of a respiratory pathogen. That then gave rise to an October event, Event 201.
On behalf of our partners in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Event 201 took place 5 months before COVID-19 was declared a pandemic. The participants of the event are some of the same people that are now deeply involved in the real pandemic and profiting from it as well. Event 201 was a scripted, multi-camera, live event that was broadcast globally via the internet. An event of this complexity and magnitude would take months to write, prep, and produce, placing the conception date at least 1 year prior to the actual pandemic.
There is no question that there will be a surprise outbreak.
Anthony Fauci knew as early as January of 2017 that we would see an outbreak before the end of 2020. Even Bill Gates, a man with no medical training, knew it was coming.
If we start now, we can be ready for the next epidemic.
Every single thing that you have seen play out in front of your eyes, all of them laid out in their tabletop exercise, which, by the way, fact checkers have said has nothing to do with the coronavirus outbreak. Just happenstance. This is that wonderful universe of improbabilities where events just co-emerge and then nature conveniently backs itself into our architecture. That's the scenario we're supposed to accept. Brilliant.
Some countries have banned travel from the worst affected areas.
The President has made a decision to suspend all travel to the United Kingdom and Ireland.
Dis and misinformation circulating over the internet.
Across the world, misinformation about the virus is being shared online.
A significant demand for N95 masks and gloves are on the rise.
The demand for N95 masks to prevent the deadly airborne virus has surged.
We could eventually have 52 million treatment courses per year but it will take many months to get there.
We're still many months out from having something that we can really deploy to the public.
And 65% of those polled are eager to take the vaccine, even if it's experimental.
A new poll finds that 49% of Americans say they would get a COVID-19 vaccine should an effective one be discovered.
I'm curious, who wrote the Event 201 script? If the visionaries of the event knew at least 1 year in advance what was needed, why didn't they take care of those things? Considering that Bill Gates has donated half of his fortune to make the world safer, why didn't he help to better prepare our hospitals and frontline workers? Why didn't any of the event's wealthy sponsors do something?
Now here we are. You know, we didn't simulate this, we didn't practice.
On behalf of our partners in the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
So both the health policies and economic policies, we find ourselves in uncharted territory.
Did you hear what Bill Gates said? We didn't practice for this and we're in uncharted territory. A clear lie. Ladies and gentlemen, why therefore should we believe anything this man says if he is prepared to tell such a bare-faced lie? He organised Event 201. Okay, let me tie up my concern. There's a possibility of a second and more deadly virus being deliberately released. In other videos I told you that I hadn't completed sufficient research into 5G, but the second deadly virus could easily be blamed on the effects of 5G towers, and the network is more than capable if they decide to switch those weapons on. So it could be mass murder from 5G or from a second and real deadly virus. Either way, it will be used to further their agenda. Here you can see an excerpt from the 2010 document released by the Rockefeller Foundation, who, by the way, are cabal through and through. This document is called The Scenario for the Future of Technology and International Development. On page 18, there is the pandemic lockstep scenario. Reading it is like reading the events of 2020 to the letter. However, the bit I want to focus on this video is that they are planning on releasing a weaponized version of that virus with a much higher mortality rate. And here's a video clip to back that statement up, that the Lockstep document actually exists.
In 2010, the Rockefeller Foundation released a 54-page document called Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. Page 18 features the pandemic scenario, Lockstep, a world of tighter top-down government control and authoritarian leadership, with limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. China's government was not the only one that took extreme measures to protect its citizens from risk and exposure. During the pandemic, national leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed airtight rules and restrictions, from the mandatory wearing of face masks to body temperature checks at the entries to communal spaces like train stations and supermarkets. Even after the pandemic faded, this more authoritarian control and oversight of citizens and their activities stuck, and even intensified.
We are living in a time where leadership, unfortunately, is compromised. And by that I mean that individuals are placed in power for their ability to be influenced, not their merits of leadership.
Well, from that you can see that document, written 10 years ago, when combined with Event 201 played out 5 months before the release of the COVID-19 news, we are far from out of danger. Now, getting mad at politicians, I think, is a waste of time. As the speaker just said, they're all compromised. For a solution to this, you'll need to watch the video in this series called The Answer. Here is some more evidence.
There is no question that there will be a surprise outbreak.
Anthony Fauci knew as early as January of 2017 that we would see an outbreak before the end of 2020. Even Bill Gates, a man with no medical training, knew it was coming.
If we start now, we can be ready for the next epidemic.
I don't know about you, but I always get a bad feeling when Bill and Melinda Gates smile so happily when talking about the next epidemic. They are looking forward to it. Let's look at some more simulations and actual event comparisons to remove any lingering doubt.
Some countries have banned travel from the worst affected areas.
The president has made a decision to suspend all travel to the United Kingdom and Ireland.
And misinformation circulating over the internet.
Across the world, misinformation about the virus is being shared online.
A significant demand for N95 masks and gloves are on the rise.
The demand for N95 masks to prevent the deadly airborne virus has surged.
We could eventually have 52 million treatment courses per year, but it will take many months to get there.
We're still many months out from having something that we can really deploy to the public.
And 65% of those polled are eager to take the vaccine, even if it's experimental.
A new poll finds that 49% of Americans say they would get a COVID-19 vaccine should an effective one be discovered.
I'm curious, who wrote the Event 201 script? If the visionaries of the event knew at least 1 year in advance what was needed, why didn't they take care of those things? Considering that Bill Gates has donated half of his fortune to make the world safer, why didn't he help to better prepare our hospitals and frontline workers? Why didn't any of the event's wealthy sponsors do something?
Now here we are. You know, we didn't simulate this, we didn't practice.
On behalf of our partners, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
So both the health policies and economic policies, we find ourselves in uncharted territory.
If it wasn't a miracle enough that they could predict this pandemic, here's a preview of the future Bill Gates has planned for us.
To be ready for pandemic 2, I call this pandemic 1. To be ready for pandemic 2, I call this pandemic 1.
Now in this last clip, the last clip's short, but it is the reason for this video to warn you that unless we wake up, the cabal will do this over and over until all of their goals are achieved. The thing that actually angers me is the smiling, smug, knowing expressions of both Bill and Melinda Gates. I find that a disturbing insight. They are smiling about an event that will kill your family. Take a look for yourself.
Well, this won't be the last pandemic that we face. So we'll have to prepare for the next one. That, I'd say is, will get attention this time. Mm-hmm.
And just in case you missed my point, I apologize, but I'm playing it again.
Well, this won't be the last pandemic that we face. So we'll have to prepare for the next one. That, I'd say is, will get attention this time. Mm-hmm.
The good news is we don't have to let this happen. Look at my video, The Answer, and join the resistance. See you soon.